The haunting sound of breaking glass cut through the night air, as Felicity Shaw found herself trapped in a nightmare that would soon become the most life-changing event of her young life. At 22, she had never imagined she would be cowering behind the bar of the Silver Dollar Saloon in Hot Springs, South Dakota, listening to the heavy footsteps of the drunken owner as he turned the key in the lock, sealing her fate for the night. It was 1878, and the Black Hills region was still reeling from the gold rush that had brought fortune seekers, outlaws, and desperate souls to the Dakota Territory. Felicity had arrived just 3 months prior, her life savings spent on the stagecoach fare from Philadelphia after her parents' passing left her with nothing but debts and painful memories. The Silver Dollar had seemed like salvation when Harold Winters, the portly, red-faced owner, had offered her work as a barmaid. The pay was meager, but it came with a small room above the establishment and regular meals. What Felicity hadn't understood when accepting the position was the true nature of Winters' expectations. "You can hide all you want, girl," Winters' slurred voice called out as he stumbled through the darkened saloon. "But you're mine tonight. That was our arrangement." Felicity bit her lip to keep from crying out. There had been no such arrangement, only Winters' drunken delusions and mounting obsession with his newest employee. She pressed herself further into the corner behind the bar, praying the darkness would conceal her. The floorboards creaked as Winters moved closer, his breathing heavy with whiskey and lust. "Please, Mr. Winters," Felicity finally called out, her voice trembling. "I never agreed to anything beyond serving drinks. Let me go to my room and we can forget this happened." Winters' laugh was ugly, echoing against the saloon's wooden walls. "Your room? Nothing in this place is yours, girl. I own it all, including you." The sound of his boots grew closer, and Felicity frantically searched for a weapon, anything to defend herself. Her hand closed around the neck of an empty whiskey bottle. Suddenly, the front door splintered open with a tremendous crash. Felicity jumped at the sound, nearly dropping her makeshift weapon. "Evening, Winters," came a deep, measured voice that Felicity didn't recognize. "Heard some commotion passing by. Thought I'd check it wasn't trouble." "This ain't your business, Mercer," Winters spat. "Get out of my establishment." Felicity peered over the edge of the bar to see a tall figure silhouetted in the doorway, his broad shoulders nearly filling the frame. A cowboy hat sat low on his head, and even in the dim light, she could see the glint of a revolver at his hip. "When I hear a lady in distress, I make it my business," the stranger replied calmly. His eyes scanned the room until they found Felicity's terrified face peeking over the bar. "You all right, miss?" Before she could answer, Winters lunged for a shotgun mounted behind the bar. The cowboy moved with surprising speed for his size, crossing the room in 3 long strides and bringing the butt of his revolver down on Winters' wrist. The saloon owner howled in pain, the shotgun clattering to the floor. "You broke my hand, you son of a, watch your language in front of the lady," the cowboy cut him off, kicking the shotgun away. He turned to Felicity, who had now stood up from her hiding place, still clutching the bottle. "Gather your things, miss. You're coming home with me." Felicity blinked in surprise. "I beg your pardon," the cowboy's expression softened slightly. "My sister runs a boarding house on the edge of town, proper place for a lady. You'll be safe there until we sort this out." He tipped his hat. "Ethan Mercer at your service." "I own her contract," Winters snarled, cradling his injured hand. "She can't leave." Ethan Mercer's eyes hardened. "Contract for serving drinks, I imagine, not for whatever you had in mind tonight." He turned back to Felicity. "What's your name, miss?" "Felicity Shaw," she replied, finally lowering the bottle. "Well, Miss Shaw, I suggest you get your belongings. Unless you'd prefer to stay." Winters lunged for Ethan, but the cowboy simply sidestepped, letting the drunk man stumble past him and crash into a table. "I'll get my things," Felicity said quickly, already moving toward the stairs that led to her small room. It took her less than 5 minutes to gather everything she owned into a single carpet bag. When she returned downstairs, Ethan Mercer stood in the same spot, keeping a watchful eye on Winters, who had slumped into a chair, muttering curses. "You'll regret this, Mercer," Winters threatened. "Sheriff Daly's my friend. He'll have you arrested for breaking in." "Sheriff Daly's also my friend," Ethan replied evenly, "and he takes a dim view of men who lock women in against their will." He gestured for Felicity to precede him out the door. "After you, Miss Shaw." The night air was cool on Felicity's face as she stepped onto the boardwalk. Hot Springs was quiet at this late hour, with only a few lanterns illuminating the main street. In the distance, she could hear the rushing waters that gave the town its name. Ethan led her to where a large chestnut gelding was tethered. "Can you ride, Miss Shaw?" "Yes, though it's been some time," she admitted. With practiced ease, Ethan mounted the horse, then reached down to help Felicity up behind him. She hesitated only briefly before taking his hand and allowing herself to be pulled up. Her carpet bag hung from the saddle horn, and she had no choice but to wrap her arms around Ethan's waist as the horse began to move. "Thank you," she said softly against his back. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come along." "Nothing good," Ethan replied grimly. "Winters has a reputation. Should have warned you when I first saw you working there last week. You noticed me before tonight." There was a pause before he answered. "Hard not to notice a lady like yourself in a place like the Silver Dollar." They rode in silence through the sleeping town, past the bathhouses that utilized the natural hot springs and had given the settlement its name and purpose. Eventually, they turned onto a side street where a large two-story house stood apart from its neighbors, a warm light glowing from one of the windows. "My sister's place," Ethan explained as he helped Felicity dismount. "She takes in respectable ladies who need lodging. Runs a tight ship, but she's fair." The front door opened before they reached it, revealing a woman a few years older than Ethan, her dark hair pulled back in a simple bun. "Ethan Mercer, what on earth are you doing bringing a young woman to my door at this hour?" she demanded, though her tone held more curiosity than actual anger. "Evening, Martha," Ethan replied, ushering Felicity forward. "This is Miss Felicity Shaw. She's had some trouble with Harold Winters and needs a safe place to stay." Martha's expression immediately softened. "That horrible man." "Come in, dear. You must be frightened half to death." Felicity followed Martha into a warm parlor, gratefully accepting the cup of tea that was pressed into her hands moments later. Ethan remained standing by the door, his hat in his hands. "I'll leave you ladies to get acquainted," he said. "Miss Shaw, you're in good hands now. Martha will take care of you. You're leaving?" Felicity asked, surprised by the disappointment she felt. Ethan nodded. "Got to see to my horse, and I've got an early start tomorrow. I do some work for the stage company, escorting runs through uncertain territory." "A glorified guard," Martha explained with a fond smile, "though he fancies himself quite the hero." Ethan's cheeks colored slightly. "I'll check on you tomorrow, Miss Shaw. Make sure you're settling in all right." After he left, Martha showed Felicity to a small but comfortable bedroom on the second floor. "Rest now, dear. We'll sort everything else out in the morning." Alone in the unfamiliar room, Felicity sat on the edge of the bed, her mind spinning with the events of the night. From terror to rescue in the span of an hour, her life had taken yet another unexpected turn. She thought of Ethan Mercer's steady presence, the way he'd faced down Winters without hesitation. For the first time since arriving in Hot Springs, Felicity felt something like hope. The morning brought a clarity that the chaotic night had lacked. Sunlight streamed through the lace curtains of Felicity's new room, illuminating a space far more pleasant than her quarters above the saloon. A proper bed with a patchwork quilt, a small writing desk, and a washstand with a porcelain basin spoke of modest comfort rather than mere necessity. Felicity dressed in her second-best dress, a simple blue cotton affair that had seen better days, and made her way downstairs, following the scent of coffee and fresh bread. In the dining room, she found Martha Mercer setting a large table for breakfast, while three young women around Felicity's age chatted amicably. "Ah, Miss Shaw, good morning," Martha greeted her. I was about to send someone to wake you. Please join us for breakfast. Ladies, this is Miss Felicity Shaw, our newest boarder. Miss Shaw, meet Miss Thompson, Miss Laurel, and Miss Cooper. The women offered friendly greetings, though Felicity detected curiosity in their eyes. News traveled fast in small towns, and she suspected they already knew something of how she'd arrived at their boarding house. Miss Thompson teaches at the school, Martha explained as she ushered Felicity to a seat. Miss Laurel works at the milliner's shop, and Miss Cooper is our local telegraph operator. It's a pleasure to meet you all, Felicity said, somewhat overwhelmed by the immediate inclusion. Miss Shaw was working at the Silver Dollar, Martha added, her tone carefully neutral. As a barmaid, Felicity clarified quickly, not wanting any misunderstandings. Though I'm afraid that employment has come to an end. Miss Cooper, a petite woman with bright eyes and a quick smile, leaned forward. Winters is a brute. You're better off away from there. Indeed, Martha agreed, pouring coffee for Felicity. And you needn't worry about employment, my dear. There are several respectable establishments in Hot Springs that would be glad of your help. Breakfast proved to be a more lively affair than Felicity had experienced in months. The women discussed local happenings, shared jokes, and generally behaved as friends rather than mere housemates. It was a stark contrast to the tense, watchful meals she'd taken alone at the saloon. As they were finishing, a knock at the door drew Martha away. Moments later, she returned with Ethan following behind her, his tall frame seeming larger in the modest dining room. He'd removed his hat, revealing dark hair that curled slightly at the ends, and he'd shaved since the previous night, highlighting a strong jawline. Ladies, he greeted them with a nod, though his eyes settled on Felicity. Miss Shaw, I trust you slept well. Yes, thank you, Mr. Mercer, she replied, suddenly aware of the other women's attention shifting between them with obvious interest. I've come to offer you some assistance, if you're willing, Ethan continued. Thought I might take you around town, introduce you to some folks who might be hiring, unless you've made other arrangements. Before Felicity could answer, Martha interrupted. What about your work with the stage company? I thought you had a run today. Postponed until tomorrow. Problem with one of the horses. Ethan shrugged. Gives me a day to help Miss Shaw get settled. Felicity hesitated, aware of the impropriety of spending the day with a man she barely knew, regardless of his kindness the night before. That's very generous, Mr. Mercer, but I wouldn't want to impose. It's no imposition, he assured her. And Martha can come along as chaperone if that would make you more comfortable. Martha snorted softly, as if I have nothing better to do than follow you two around town. She waved a hand dismissively. Go on, Felicity. Ethan knows everyone worth knowing in Hot Springs, and a few not worth knowing as well. He'll see you right. With that blessing, Felicity found herself walking alongside Ethan down Hot Springs Main Street an hour later. The town was bustling with morning activity, shopkeepers sweeping boardwalks, freight wagons delivering goods, and visitors heading toward the bathhouses that had made the town a destination for those seeking the healing properties of the mineral waters. I realized I never properly thanked you, Felicity said as they walked. For last night I was very frightened. Ethan's expression darkened momentarily. No thanks necessary. Winters had no right to treat you that way. He cleared his throat. I should mention I stopped by the sheriff's office this morning, explained what happened. Sheriff Daly says he'll have a word with Winters, but there's likely nothing to be done officially, Felicity finished for him. Unfortunately, no. Winters has friends in town, and there were no witnesses besides us. Ethan's jaw tightened. However, the sheriff did say that if Winters gives you any more trouble, you're to come straight to him. They continued down the street, with Ethan pointing out various establishments and occasionally stopping to introduce Felicity to shopkeepers and business owners. Everyone seemed to know him, greeting him with genuine warmth and respect. You're quite popular, Felicity observed after they left the general store, where the proprietor had practically beamed at Ethan's arrival. Been in Hot Springs most of my life, he explained. My father brought us here when I was 10 after my mother passed. He worked security for the Stagecoach Line too until a heart attack took him 5 years back. I'm sorry, Felicity said softly. Ethan nodded in acknowledgement. Martha got married young, lost her husband in a mining accident 2 years later. She opened the boarding house with what little was left from his claim. He gave Felicity a sidelong glance. What about you? What brought you to Hot Springs? Felicity hesitated. Her story wasn't one she enjoyed sharing, but Ethan had been nothing but honest with her. My parents died last winter, one after the other. Influenza. The family home and business had to be sold to pay their debts, and there was an unpleasant situation with a former suitor who wouldn't accept my refusal. So you came west. As far as my remaining funds would take me, she confirmed. Hot Springs seemed as good a place as any to start fresh, and I'd heard the waters here were healing. I thought perhaps. She trailed off, embarrassed by her youthful optimism. That you might find healing too, Ethan suggested gently. Felicity nodded, grateful for his understanding. They had reached the end of the main street, where it branched toward the hills surrounding the town. Ethan pointed to a modest building with a freshly painted sign reading Hot Springs Mercantile and Dry Goods. Frank Peterson owns this place, Ethan explained. Good man, fair employer. His wife's been after him to hire help since their business has been growing. Shall we inquire? An hour later, Felicity emerged from the mercantile with a position secured. Mrs. Peterson, a kindly woman with a no-nonsense attitude, had taken to Felicity immediately, particularly impressed by her neat handwriting and knowledge of bookkeeping skills. Felicity had acquired helping her father with his small publishing business back in Philadelphia. I start tomorrow, Felicity told Ethan, unable to keep the excitement from her voice. 6 days a week with Sundays free, and the pay is more than I was making at the saloon. That's wonderful news, Ethan replied, his smile genuine. The Petersons are good people. You'll be treated right there. They walked back toward the center of town, Felicity's steps lighter than they had been in months. The relief of having secured respectable employment so quickly was overwhelming. I can never repay you for your kindness, Mr. Mercer, she said as they approached Martha's boarding house. There's nothing to repay, he insisted. And please call me Ethan. Mr. Mercer makes me feel like my father. Ethan then, she agreed, testing the familiar address, and you must call me Felicity. They paused at the gate to the boarding house, an unexpected awkwardness falling between them. Felicity realized she was reluctant for their time together to end. Would you, she began, just as Ethan said. Perhaps they both stopped, then laughed softly. Ladies first, Ethan said with a slight bow. Felicity gathered her courage. I was wondering if you might join us for supper tonight, as a small token of my gratitude. Martha mentioned you often eat here anyway. I'd be honored, Ethan replied, his expression warming. Until this evening, then. As Felicity watched him walk away, she was struck by the strange turn her life had taken. Yesterday, she had been a barmaid living in fear. Today, she had a respectable position, safe lodging, and the attention of a man who seemed genuinely kind. For the first time since arriving in the Dakota Territory, Hot Springs felt like it might become home. The next 2 weeks passed in a flurry of activity as Felicity settled into her new life. Working at the mercantile proved far more pleasant than her time at the saloon. The Petersons treated her with respect, the customers were generally polite, and the work itself was varied enough to keep her engaged, from organizing inventory to helping customers find what they needed to maintaining the account ledgers. She saw Ethan regularly, though his duties with the stage company often took him away for days at a time. He'd begun making a habit of dining at Martha's boarding house whenever he was in town, and Felicity found herself watching the door each evening, her heart lifting when he appeared and sinking slightly on the nights he didn't. You're smitten with my brother, Martha observed one evening as they washed dishes together after the other boarders had retired. Felicity nearly dropped the plate she was drying. I admire him greatly, of course. He saved me from a terrible situation. Martha's knowing smile made it clear she wasn't fooled. Ethan has always had a protective streak, but I've never seen him quite so attentive to anyone he's helped before. He's merely being kind, Felicity insisted, though she couldn't quite meet Martha's eyes. If you say so, dear. Martha handed her another wet plate. Though I should mention he's never taken to escorting any of my other boarders to the town social next Saturday. Felicity's hands stilled. The town social? Oh, didn't he ask you yet? Martha looked momentarily chagrined. Perhaps I've spoken out of turn. Before Felicity could press for more information, a knock at the door interrupted them. Martha wiped her hands on her apron and went to answer, returning moments later with Ethan in tow. "Evening, ladies," he greeted them, looking somewhat weary but smiling nonetheless. "Just got back from escorting the Denver stage. Thought I'd stop by before turning in." "Perfect timing," Martha said, shooting Felicity a meaningful glance. "I was just heading upstairs to finish some mending. Felicity can keep you company while I'm gone." Before either of them could protest, Martha had disappeared up the stairs, leaving them alone in the kitchen. "Your sister isn't particularly subtle," Felicity said with a small laugh, setting aside her drying cloth. Ethan's smile turned rueful. "She's been trying to see me settled since our father died. Says a man my age 30 next birthday ought to have a family of his own by now." "And what do you say to that?" Felicity asked, surprised by her own boldness. "That a man ought to have something to offer a wife beyond a dangerous job and a rented room above the livery," he replied, more serious than she'd expected. Felicity studied him in the warm lamplight. Despite his modest circumstances, Ethan Mercer was the kind of man any sensible woman would consider a good prospect, honorable, hardworking, and kind. That he didn't see his own worth only increased her growing admiration for him. "Martha mentioned something about a town social," she said, changing the subject. Ethan's expression brightened. "Yes, it's next Saturday. Dancing, food, the usual community gathering. I was hoping. That is, I intended to ask if you might allow me to escort you." The formal phrasing made Felicity smile. "I would enjoy that very much." "Excellent." He seemed genuinely pleased, almost boyishly so. "I should warn you, I'm not the most accomplished dancer, but I promise not to step on your toes too often." "I'll hold you to that promise," she teased. They talked for nearly an hour, Ethan describing his recent journey and Felicity sharing anecdotes from the mercantile. It was easy conversation, comfortable in a way that surprised her. When he finally took his leave, Felicity found herself standing at the window, watching his retreating figure until he disappeared into the darkness. Martha's words echoed in her mind. "You're smitten with my brother." Perhaps she was, and perhaps that wasn't such a terrible thing after all. The town social was held in the newly constructed community hall, a large wooden building that served as church, meeting place, and occasional courthouse. On this night, it had been transformed with paper lanterns, wildflowers, and long tables laden with food brought by every family in attendance. Ethan arrived at the boarding house precisely at 7, looking distinctly different from his usual trail-worn appearance. He wore a clean black suit that, while not new, had been well maintained, and his dark hair was neatly combed. The other boarders made no attempt to hide their interest as he waited for Felicity in the parlor, their whispers and giggles audible from the staircase. For her part, Felicity had spent more time preparing than she cared to admit. Her best dress, a green cotton with modest lace trim, had been carefully pressed, and she'd arranged her hair in a more elaborate style than her usual simple bun. Miss Laurel, who had a talent for such things, had helped her achieve a look that was elegant without being ostentatious. When she descended the stairs and saw Ethan's expression change from polite waiting to undisguised admiration, the effort felt entirely worthwhile. "You look beautiful," he said simply, offering his arm. The walk to the community hall was filled with anticipation. Other couples and families traveled the same path, nodding greetings as they passed. Felicity recognized many of them as customers from the mercantile, and she was pleased when several called her by name. Inside the hall, the gathering was already lively. A small band played in one corner, while children raced between the adults, their excitement palpable. Ethan led Felicity through the crowd, introducing her to those she hadn't yet met and eventually guiding her toward the refreshment table, where punch and cider were being served. "Miss Shaw, how lovely to see you in more pleasant surroundings," a voice said from behind them. Felicity turned to find Sheriff Daly, a weathered man in his 50s with kind eyes that belied his tough exterior. She had met him briefly when she'd had to give her account of the night at the saloon. "Sheriff Daly, good evening," she replied with a small curtsy. "Ethan here taking good care of you?" the sheriff asked, though his smile suggested he already knew the answer. "The very best," Felicity assured him. The sheriff nodded approvingly. "Good, good. Been telling this young man for years he needs to find himself a nice girl. 'Bout time he listened." Ethan cleared his throat, clearly embarrassed. "We're just friends, Sheriff, if you say so, son." The sheriff winked at Felicity before moving on to greet other attendees. Before either of them could comment on the sheriff's assumption, the band struck up a lively tune, and couples began moving toward the cleared space in the center of the hall. "Shall we?" Ethan asked, offering his hand. Felicity had always enjoyed dancing, though opportunities had been limited since her parents' passing. She accepted Ethan's hand eagerly, allowing him to lead her into the set forming for a Virginia reel. True to his warning, Ethan was not a particularly graceful dancer, but what he lacked in technique, he made up for in enthusiasm. They laughed together as he occasionally missed a step or turned the wrong way, but even these missteps felt right, somehow genuine moments of shared joy rather than embarrassments. As the evening progressed, they danced several more sets, paused to enjoy the refreshments, and mingled with the townspeople. Felicity was surprised by how many people she had come to know in her short time in Hot Springs, and how readily they seemed to accept her as one of their own. During a quieter moment, as they stood at the edge of the dance floor catching their breath, Ethan nodded toward a corner of the room. "Don't look now, but Winter's just arrived." Despite his instruction, Felicity couldn't help but glance in that direction. Harold Winters stood near the entrance, his face flushed with what might have been alcohol or the heat of the room. He was speaking to a group of men, but his gaze kept drifting toward where she stood with Ethan. "He won't bother you," Ethan assured her, noticing her distress. "Not with half the town here to witness it." "I know," Felicity said, though she couldn't suppress a small shiver. "It's just, I still have nightmares about that night sometimes." Ethan's expression hardened. "We can leave if you'd prefer." "No," she said firmly, placing her hand on his arm. "I won't let him drive me away from enjoying an evening with friends." The hesitation before the word friends did not escape either of them. Something had been growing between them over the past weeks, something neither had put into words yet. The band began a waltz, slower and more intimate than the group dances that had dominated the evening. Couples moved closer together, hands clasped, arms encircling waists. "One more dance?" Ethan asked softly. Felicity nodded, allowing him to lead her back to the floor. This dance was different, no complex patterns to follow, just the simple rhythm of 3/4 time and the warm presence of Ethan's hand at her waist. "I'm glad I found you that night," Ethan said as they moved together, "though I wish it had been under better circumstances." "I'm glad too," Felicity replied. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if you hadn't come along." Ethan's arm tightened slightly around her waist. "I try not to think about that. I just thank God I was passing by when I did." They fell silent, letting the music guide their steps. Felicity was acutely aware of Ethan's proximity, of the slight roughness of his palm against her hand, of the clean scent of soap and the outdoors that seemed to cling to him even in his best clothes. As the waltz drew to a close, Ethan looked down at her with an expression that made her heart race. For a moment she thought he might kiss her, right there on the dance floor with the entire town as witness. Instead, he merely squeezed her hand gently. "Would you like to step outside for some fresh air?" he asked. The night air was cool after the warmth of the hall, the stars brilliantly clear above the small town. Couples and small groups dotted the area around the building, seeking momentary respite from the noise and heat inside. Ethan led Felicity to a quieter spot near a stand of cottonwood trees that rustled softly in the evening breeze. "Thank you for inviting me tonight," Felicity said, breaking the comfortable silence that had fallen between them. "I've enjoyed myself immensely." "As have I," Ethan replied. He seemed uncharacteristically hesitant, his fingers tapping lightly against his leg. "Felicity, there's something I've been wanting to tell you." The seriousness in his tone made her nervous. "Yes, I've taken a new position. The stage company's offered me a route of my own, Denver to Cheyenne, with Hot Springs as a regular stop." Felicity's heart sank. "You're leaving Hot Springs?" "Not exactly." He turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. "I'll be based here still, but I'll be away more regularly. 3 days at a stretch, sometimes 4. It's better pay, more responsibility." "That sounds like a good opportunity," Felicity said carefully, trying to mask her disappointment at the thought of seeing him less frequently. "It is, and it means." He paused, seeming to gather his courage. "It means I might finally have something to offer a wife beyond a dangerous job and a rented room." Felicity's breath caught in her throat. "Ethan." "I'm not proposing," he said quickly, though his grip on her hands tightened. "Not yet. It's too soon and you deserve a proper courtship. But I wanted you to know my intentions, if you'd be amenable, that is." A mixture of joy and trepidation filled Felicity's chest. "I would be very amenable to such a courtship." The smile that spread across Ethan's face was radiant. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to withdraw, he leaned down until his lips met hers in a gentle, chaste kiss that nevertheless sent warmth flooding through her entire body. When they parted, Ethan kept her hands in his expression serious once more. "There's something else you should know. The new route, it can be dangerous. Stage robberies have increased in the territories lately." "Are you trying to frighten me away already?" Felicity asked, attempting to keep her tone light despite the genuine concern his words provoked. "Never," he replied earnestly. "But I believe in honesty between us. I want you to understand what you'd be agreeing to." Felicity considered his words carefully. Life in the West was inherently precarious, especially for those whose work took them beyond the relative safety of established towns. But wasn't all life uncertain? Her parents' sudden deaths had taught her that tragedy could strike anywhere, even in the supposedly civilized East. "I understand," she said finally, "and I'm not frightened away." Relief crossed Ethan's features. He raised her hands to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "Then I'll speak to your employer tomorrow to ask permission to court you properly." Felicity laughed softly. "Mr. Peterson will be delighted. He's been hinting for weeks that you had intentions." "Has he now?" Ethan's eyes crinkled with amusement. "And here I thought I was being subtle." "Not particularly," Felicity teased. "According to Martha, half the town has been taking bets on when you'd finally speak up." Ethan groaned. "Small towns, no secrets anywhere." Their laughter mingled in the night air, a promise of many such moments to come. The week after the social, Ethan departed on his first run as a stage route manager, leaving Felicity with a proper goodbye at the boarding house door under Martha's watchful but approving eye. The 4 days of his absence seemed interminable, filled with work at the mercantile and quiet evenings at the boarding house. On the morning of his expected return, Felicity found herself distracted, checking the clock frequently and peering out the mercantile's windows whenever a commotion sounded from the street. "He'll be back when he's back, Mrs. Peterson said gently after Felicity nearly dropped a bolt of calico while craning her neck to see a passing wagon. "Staring out the window won't bring him any faster." Felicity blushed. "I'm sorry, I'll focus on my work." Mrs. Peterson's expression was kind. "No need to apologize, dear. I remember what it was like to be young and in love. Mr. Peterson went to fight in the war not 3 months after we were married. I watched that road every day for 2 years until he came home. Felicity hadn't thought of her feelings for Ethan as love, yet it seemed too soon, too precipitous, but she didn't correct Mrs. Peterson. Instead, she redoubled her efforts to concentrate on inventory, only to be startled an hour later by the sound of the stagecoach horn announcing its arrival. "Go on," Mrs. Peterson said with a knowing smile when Felicity's head snapped up at the sound. "Mr. Peterson can mind the store while you greet that young man of yours." Grateful for the understanding, Felicity quickly untied her work apron and smoothed her hair before hurrying out to the street. The stagecoach had already pulled up to its designated stop, passengers disembarking and luggage being unloaded. She scanned the busy scene for Ethan's tall figure, her heart racing with anticipation. When she finally spotted him, her relief quickly turned to concern. He was speaking with Sheriff Daly, his expression grave, his clothing dusty and disheveled. A bandage was wrapped around his left forearm, visible where his sleeve had been torn. Felicity approached cautiously, not wanting to interrupt what appeared to be an official discussion. Ethan saw her before she reached them, his face lighting up despite his obvious fatigue. "Felicity," he said, excusing himself from the sheriff and moving to meet her. "I was going to clean up before seeing you." "What happened?" she asked, eyeing the bandage with worry. "Are you badly hurt?" Ethan glanced down at his arm, "Just a graze, nothing serious." "We were robbed about 10 miles outside of Cheyenne," a voice behind them explained. Felicity turned to see one of the passengers, an elderly gentleman in a well-tailored suit. "This young man saved us all with his quick thinking." Ethan looked embarrassed. "I just did what anyone would do." "Nonsense," the man insisted. "3 armed men stopped the coach, and Mr. Mercer here not only prevented them from taking our valuables, but managed to drive them off without any passengers being harmed. Only got that injury because he put himself between the robbers and the ladies on board." Felicity's heart constricted at the thought of how differently things might have turned out. "You should see a doctor." "Already did in Cheyenne," Ethan assured her. "It's clean and bandaged properly." Sheriff Daly joined them, nodding a greeting to Felicity. "Ethan's given me descriptions of the men, match a gang that's been operating along the northern routes. I've wired the territorial marshal." "Will you be able to catch them?" Felicity asked. The sheriff's expression was grim. "Hard to say, territory's big and they could be anywhere by now. But at least we know what we're looking for." He clapped Ethan on his uninjured shoulder. "Get some rest, son. You've earned it." After the sheriff departed, Ethan turned back to Felicity, his exhaustion more evident now that the immediate business was concluded. "I should let you get back to work." "Mrs. Peterson gave me leave to welcome you home," Felicity said. "And I think you could use a hot meal and good company. Martha will have dinner ready soon." Ethan's grateful smile warmed her heart. "That sounds perfect." They walked toward the boarding house together, Felicity resisting the urge to take his arm for support. Despite his assurances, she could see that the injury and the strain of the journey had taken their toll. "I was worried about you," she admitted as they walked. "Even before I knew about the robbery." Ethan glanced at her, his expression softening. "I thought about you every mile of the way, kept the stage moving faster than usual because I was eager to get back." The simple honesty of his statement touched Felicity deeply. In Philadelphia, she had known men who spoke flowery words of devotion but whose actions rarely matched their rhetoric. Ethan was the opposite, sparing with romantic declarations, but steadfast in his behavior. At the boarding house, Martha fussed over Ethan's injury while simultaneously preparing a hearty meal that soon had color returning to his cheeks. Felicity sat across from him at the table, watching as he recounted the journey for his sister's benefit, downplaying the danger and emphasizing the more amusing incidents along the way. "And how soon do you leave again?" Martha asked as she poured more coffee. 3 days, Ethan replied. "Enough time to rest and prepare for the next run." Martha nodded, then fixed him with a stern look. "Well, you'll need to be more careful from now on. You've responsibilities to consider." Ethan's gaze flickered to Felicity before returning to his sister. "I'm always careful, Martha." "See that you are," she replied, her tone softening. "I've just gotten used to having you around more often, would hate to lose you to some outlaw's bullet." Later, after Martha had retreated to the kitchen to begin preparations for the boarding house supper, Ethan and Felicity found themselves alone in the parlor. "Your sister worries about you," Felicity observed. "She worries about everyone," Ethan replied with a fond smile. "It's her nature." "She's not the only one who worries," Felicity admitted quietly. Ethan reached across the small space between their chairs to take her hand. "I meant what I said to Martha. I'm always careful, more so now that I have someone special to return to." The sincere way he said it made Felicity's heart skip. "I'm glad, because I've grown quite accustomed to seeing you walk through that door." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, hands linked, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Ethan spoke again. "I've been thinking about the future. With the new position, I should be able to save enough for a small house within a year, nothing fancy but a place of our own." The casual way he included her in his plans sent a thrill through Felicity. "I like the sound of that." "You do?" His eyes searched hers, hopeful. "Very much." She squeezed his hand. "Though I should warn you, I know nothing about keeping a proper home. My mother always had help, and since coming west, I've hardly had a home to keep." Ethan's laugh was warm. "Between Martha's instruction and your own intelligence, I have no doubt you'll manage beautifully. And I'm not exactly looking for a society wife." "Good, because you won't find one in me," Felicity said with a smile. "But I am a quick learner." "That you are," Ethan agreed. "And brave and kind and more beautiful than you have any right to be after spending all day working in a dusty mercantile." Felicity blushed at the compliment. "Now you're being ridiculous." "Not in the slightest," he insisted, his expression growing more serious. "Felicity, I know we've known each other only a short time, but I want you to understand how much you've come to mean to me." The earnestness in his voice made her breath catch. "Ethan." He raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "You don't need to say anything. I just wanted you to know." The moment was interrupted by the sound of the front door opening as the other boarders began returning home for the evening meal. Ethan released Felicity's hand reluctantly, standing as Miss Thompson and Miss Cooper entered the parlor. "Mr. Mercer." "We heard you were back," Miss Cooper exclaimed, "and that you've had quite the adventure." As the conversation turned to recounting the stage robbery yet again, Felicity sat back in her chair, watching Ethan interact with the other women. He was unfailingly polite and attentive, but his gaze kept returning to her, as if to ensure she was still there, still part of his world. In that moment, Felicity realized that what she felt for him had indeed grown into love, swift and unexpected as it might be. The knowledge settled in her heart like a long-held truth finally acknowledged. Summer gave way to autumn in hot springs, the days growing shorter and the nights cooler as September turned to October. Ethan continued his regular stage runs, each departure a little easier for Felicity to bear as the pattern of their lives together established itself. He would be gone for 3 or 4 days, then return for 2 or 3, during which time they would spend every available moment together. Their courtship progressed with the blessing of the community. They attended church services together on Sundays, joined friends for suppers and socials, and occasionally rode into the surrounding countryside on Ethan's days off, always with Martha or another suitable chaperone in tow. On one such Sunday in mid-October, after a particularly stirring sermon about building foundations for the future, Ethan suggested they take a walk before returning to the boarding house for dinner. "There's something I'd like to show you," he said as they strolled arm in arm away from the church, Martha following at a discreet distance. Felicity allowed him to guide her down a side street she rarely had occasion to visit, curious about his mysterious destination. They stopped in front of a small house set back from the road, its wooden siding weathered but sound, a porch spanning the front. "What do you think?" Ethan asked, watching her face carefully. Felicity studied the modest structure. "It's a lovely little house. Who lives here?" No one at present, he replied, a hint of nervousness entering his voice. I've just purchased it. Felicity turned to him in surprise. You bought a house. When, how? Finalized the sale yesterday. His smile was a mixture of pride and apprehension. As for how I've been saving every penny from my new position, and I had a bit put away already. It needs some work, but the structure is solid. Martha had caught up to them, her expression knowing. I'll just wait by the gate, shall I? Once his sister had moved away, Ethan took both of Felicity's hands in his. I know this is perhaps sooner than is proper, but I couldn't wait any longer. He drew a deep breath. Felicity Shaw, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Though she had known this moment was coming, had, in fact, been waiting for it with growing anticipation, the actual words still took her breath away. Yes, she whispered, then more firmly. Yes, Ethan, I will. His face lit up with such joy that Felicity felt her own heart might burst with happiness. He drew her into his arms, mindful of their semi-public location, and pressed a brief but tender kiss to her lips. I thought we might be married before winter sets in, he said when they parted. If that's not too soon, the house needs work, but it should be ready by then. That's not too soon at all, Felicity assured him. She glanced toward the house, already imagining it as their home. Could we look inside? Ethan produced a key from his pocket. I was hoping you'd ask. The interior was simple but spacious compared to Felicity's room at the boarding house. A front parlor opened into a kitchen at the back, with 2 bedrooms and a small study off a short hallway. The furniture was sparse, just a table and chairs in the kitchen, a bed frame in the main bedroom, but Ethan explained his plans to add more pieces as they could afford them. It's perfect, Felicity declared as they completed their tour. Absolutely perfect. Martha, who had eventually been invited inside to offer her opinion, nodded approvingly. With some curtains and a proper rug or two, it will be quite cozy, and close enough to my place that you can visit whenever you like. The news of their engagement spread quickly through Hot Springs, met with universal approval and numerous offers of assistance with the wedding preparations. Mrs. Peterson insisted on making Felicity's wedding dress as a gift, while the other ladies from the boarding house volunteered to help with decorations for the ceremony. The wedding date was set for November 15th, allowing time for the necessary preparations and for Ethan to complete the most urgent repairs to their future home. Each evening after work, he could be found at the house, replacing broken boards, fixing the roof, or painting the exterior. Felicity often joined him after finishing at the Mercantile, bringing supper that they would share on the porch steps before she returned to the boarding house. On one such evening, less than 2 weeks before the wedding, they sat watching the sunset, comfortable in each other's company. I received a letter from the stage company today, Ethan said, breaking their companionable silence. They're reorganizing the routes for winter. Felicity's hand stilled on her coffee cup. Will it affect your schedule? Yes and no. Ethan turned to face her more directly. They're reducing the frequency of the longer runs during the worst winter months. I'll have fewer trips to Denver, but more local routes. That sounds sensible, Felicity said cautiously, sensing there was more to the news. It also means I'll be home more often, Ethan continued. But the pay will be somewhat less until spring. Felicity relaxed slightly. That's hardly a catastrophe, we'll manage. You're not disappointed. I know you were counting on my current wage to help furnish the house. Ethan Mercer, Felicity said firmly, setting down her cup to take his hands. I agreed to marry you, not your salary. I'd rather have you home safe more often than have a fancy parlor set. The relief in his expression was palpable. You're an extraordinary woman, Felicity Shaw. Soon to be Felicity Mercer, she reminded him with a smile, and don't you forget it. The days leading up to the wedding passed in a flurry of activity. Final fittings for Felicity's dress, arrangements with the minister, preparation of the wedding feast, all of it orchestrated primarily by Martha, who had taken charge with characteristic efficiency. 2 days before the ceremony, Felicity was at the Mercantile, completing the day's ledger entries when the bell above the door jangled. She looked up with a customer-ready smile that faltered when she saw Harold Winters entering the shop. She hadn't encountered the saloon owner since the night of the town social, when he had watched her dancing with Ethan from across the room. According to local gossip, he had been lying low after Sheriff Daly's warning, focusing on his business and causing less trouble than usual. "Miss Shaw," Winters said, removing his hat. "Or soon to be Mrs. Mercer, I understand." Felicity straightened, grateful that Mrs. Peterson was in the back room and would hear if there was any disturbance. "Mr. Winters, what can I help you with today?" "Just needed some tobacco," he replied, approaching the counter where various smoking products were displayed. "And I thought I might offer my congratulations on your upcoming nuptials." His tone seemed sincere enough, but Felicity remained wary. "Thank you." Winters selected a pouch of tobacco, placing it on the counter. "I also wanted to apologize for my behavior that night at the saloon. It was unworthy of a gentleman." Felicity was so surprised by the apology that she momentarily couldn't respond. "I appreciate that, Mr. Winters." He nodded, his gaze dropping to the counter. "I was in a dark place after my wife passed, took to the bottle more than was good for me, not an excuse, just a fact." He pulled out coins to pay for his purchase. "Anyway, Mercer's a good man, you'll do well with him." As Felicity wrapped the tobacco, still somewhat stunned by this unexpected interaction, Winters added, "I sold the silver dollar last week, moving to Deadwood to try my luck there." "I see," Felicity said, handing him his parcel. "I wish you well, Mr. Winters." He tipped his hat. "Good day, Miss Shaw, and good luck." With that, he turned and left the store, leaving Felicity staring after him. Mrs. Peterson emerged from the back room moments later. "Was that Harold Winters I heard?" "Yes," Felicity confirmed, still processing the strange encounter. "He came to buy tobacco and to apologize." Mrs. Peterson's eyebrows rose. "Did he now? Wonders never cease." She patted Felicity's hand. "Sometimes people can surprise you, my dear, not always for the worse." That evening, when Felicity recounted the incident to Ethan during their now customary supper at their future home, his reaction was more skeptical. Winters apologized and mentioned moving to Deadwood. He frowned thoughtfully. "Sheriff Daly said something about Winters selling the saloon, but I didn't know he was leaving town." "You don't believe his apology was genuine?" Felicity asked. Ethan sighed. "I'd like to think a man can change, but Winters has a history of saying whatever suits him at the moment. Still, if he's truly leaving Hot Springs, that can only be good news for us." The subject was forgotten as they turned to more pleasant topics: final wedding preparations and plans for their first Christmas as husband and wife. As twilight deepened, Ethan walked Felicity back to the boarding house, both of them counting the days until such partings would no longer be necessary. November 15th dawned clear and cold, the kind of crisp autumn day that hinted at the winter to come but was perfect for a wedding. Felicity woke early, too excited and nervous to sleep, and found Martha already up, preparing a special breakfast for the bride-to-be. "You need your strength today," Martha insisted, placing a plate of eggs, bacon, and biscuits before her. "It's going to be a long and wonderful day." The morning passed in a whirlwind of activity. Felicity bathed with special care, using the lavender-scented soap Martha had given her as a wedding gift. Miss Laurel arrived to help with her hair, arranging it in an elegant style adorned with small white flowers. Mrs. Peterson delivered the completed wedding dress, a simple but beautiful creation of ivory cotton with delicate embroidery at the bodice and cuffs. By early afternoon, Felicity stood in her room at the boarding house, hardly recognizing the woman in the small mirror. The dress fit perfectly, enhancing her slender figure without being immodest. Her hair framed her face softly, and the excitement of the day had brought a natural blush to her cheeks. "Oh, my dear," Martha said from the doorway, her eyes suspiciously bright. "You look absolutely beautiful." "Do you think Ethan will think so?" Felicity asked, suddenly anxious. Martha laughed softly. "That boy thinks you're beautiful first thing in the morning with flour on your nose from baking. He'll be speechless when he sees you today." A knock at the front door downstairs signaled the arrival of their escort. Mr. Peterson had offered to give Felicity away, a role her own father would have filled had he lived. With no family of her own present, Felicity had gratefully accepted. The small church was filled to capacity when Felicity arrived. It seemed the entire town had turned out to witness the union of Ethan Mercer and the young woman he had rescued from the Silver Dollar Saloon that fateful night. As the simple music began, Miss Thompson playing the church's pump organ, Felicity took Mr. Peterson's arm and began the walk down the aisle. Ethan stood at the altar, looking more handsome than Felicity had ever seen him in a new black suit and white shirt. His eyes never left her as she approached, his expression a mixture of awe and adoration that banished any remaining nervousness she might have felt. The ceremony itself was brief but meaningful. They exchanged vows in clear, steady voices, promising to love, honor, and cherish one another through all the challenges life might bring. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Ethan's kiss was gentle but held a promise of the passion they would soon be free to express. The celebration afterward, held in the community hall that had been transformed with autumn flowers and ribbons, lasted well into the evening. The townspeople had outdone themselves with food and drink, and even Sheriff Daly took a turn dancing with the bride. "You've made this town a happier place," he told Felicity as they moved around the floor, "especially for that husband of yours." As the celebration began to wind down, Ethan appeared at Felicity's side, offering his arm. "Ready to go home, Mrs. Mercer?" The new name sent a thrill through her. "Yes, Mr. Mercer, I believe I am." They said their goodbyes amid cheers and well wishes, stepping out into the cold night air. Ethan had arranged for a wagon to transport them and their wedding gifts to their new home, but the driver was nowhere to be seen. "That's strange," Ethan muttered, looking around. "Jim promised he'd be waiting." A sound from the shadows beside the hall made them both turn. 3 men emerged, their faces obscured by bandanas pulled up over their noses. "Evening, folks," the tallest of them said, his voice muffled but menacing. "Heard there was a wedding today, thought we'd offer our congratulations." Ethan pushed Felicity behind him, his hand moving toward the revolver he'd left at home for the wedding. "What do you want?" "Just a little wedding gift from the bride," the man replied. "Heard she's been working at the mercantile, must have access to the safe." Felicity felt cold fear grip her heart. These must be members of the gang that had robbed Ethan's stagecoach. Had they followed him back to Hot Springs, waiting for an opportunity? "There's nothing valuable in the mercantile safe," she said, finding her voice despite her fear. "Just the day's receipts, which have already been deposited at the bank." "Then I guess we'll have to settle for whatever gifts you've received today," the second man said, stepping forward. Ethan stood his ground. "You're making a mistake. Sheriff Daly is right inside, along with half the men in town. And we'll be gone before anyone notices you're missing," the third man countered, drawing a pistol from his coat. Before the situation could escalate further, a voice called from behind the would-be robbers. "I wouldn't do that if I were you, gentlemen." To Felicity's astonishment, Harold Winters stepped into view, a shotgun leveled at the 3 men. "This doesn't concern you, Winters," the first man growled. "Oh, but it does," Winters replied calmly. "You see, I've been waiting for you boys. Sheriff Daly and I had a hunch you might show up here after your little encounter with Mercer's stage." As if on cue, Sheriff Daly and several other men emerged from the side of the building, all armed and focused on the 3 robbers. "Drop your weapons," the sheriff ordered. "You're surrounded." For a tense moment, it seemed the men might resist, but faced with overwhelming odds, they eventually complied, placing their guns on the ground. As the sheriff and his deputies moved in to secure the prisoners, Winters lowered his shotgun, approaching Ethan and Felicity. "Apologies for the interruption to your wedding night," he said. "We've been watching for these fellows since they were spotted in the area yesterday, figured they might target someone from the celebration." Ethan extended his hand to Winters. "Thank you, I'm in your debt." Winters accepted the handshake with a nod. Consider it penance for past sins and a wedding gift of sorts. As the robbers were led away, Winters turned to Felicity. I meant what I said at the mercantile, Miss Shaw, Mrs. Mercer now, I suppose. I am sorry for how I treated you. Been trying to make amends before leaving town. You're still going to Deadwood? Felicity asked. Winters nodded. Nothing left for me here. Might as well try my luck elsewhere. He tipped his hat. Wish you both happiness. As he walked away, Ethan wrapped an arm around Felicity's shoulders. I never thought I'd say this, but I'm grateful to Harold Winters. People can surprise you, Felicity said softly, recalling Mrs. Peterson's words. Not always for the worse. The excitement finally over, they found their driver, who had wisely hidden when he spotted the suspicious men lurking near the hall. The short journey to their new home was quiet, both of them processing the unexpected end to their wedding celebration. When they arrived, Ethan insisted on carrying Felicity across the threshold, a tradition she had mentioned wanting to observe. Inside, they found the house transformed from the bare rooms they had been gradually furnishing. Fresh flowers adorned the tables, new curtains hung at the windows, and a fire burned merrily in the hearth, all Martha's doing, prepared while they were at the ceremony. Welcome home, Mrs. Mercer, Ethan said, setting Felicity gently on her feet but keeping his arms around her. Home, Felicity repeated, savoring the word. I like the sound of that. Their first night as husband and wife was everything Felicity had hoped for, tender, passionate, and filled with the sweet discovery of each other. Any initial awkwardness quickly gave way to a deeper connection than either had anticipated, their bodies finding a natural harmony that matched the growing bond between their hearts. In the quiet moments afterward, as they lay entwined in their marriage bed, Ethan traced gentle patterns on Felicity's bare shoulder. Happy? He asked softly. Felicity raised herself on one elbow to look at him in the dim light of the bedside lamp. Completely, are you? More than I ever thought possible, he replied, pulling her closer. When I found you that night at the saloon, I never imagined we'd end up here. It seems so long ago now, Felicity mused, as if it happened to different people. In a way, it did, Ethan said thoughtfully. You've changed me, Felicity, made me want to be more than just a man drifting from job to job, place to place. And you've changed me, she replied, given me a home, a purpose, a family. She kissed him softly. A future. They fell asleep in each other's arms, the troubles of the past and the unexpected excitement of their wedding day fading into insignificance compared to the promise of the life they were beginning together. The winter of 1878-1879 proved to be one of the harshest in memory for the Dakota Territory. Snow piled high around the small houses of hot springs, and temperatures dropped so low that the hot springs themselves steamed more dramatically than ever against the frozen landscape. For Ethan and Felicity, it was a season of adjustment and deepening love. The reduced stage schedule meant Ethan was home more often than not, allowing them to establish the rhythms and routines of married life. They learned each other's habits and preferences, occasionally bumping against differences that required compromise, but more often discovering harmonies that strengthened their bond. Felicity continued working at the mercantile, though now only 3 days a week, as she took on the responsibilities of maintaining their home. She discovered a talent for cooking that surprised both her and Ethan, experimenting with recipes shared by Martha and the other women of the town. Their little house became a warm refuge against the winter cold, filled with simple comforts and the personal touches that transformed it from mere shelter to true home. A quilt made by Martha adorned their bed, curtains sewn by Felicity hung at the windows, and furniture crafted or repaired by Ethan occupied each room. In February, as the snow continued to fall and the wind howled around the eaves, Felicity made a discovery that would change their lives once more. Ethan, she said one evening as they sat before the fire, she with her mending and he with a book about the California gold rush. I have news. He looked up, noting the mixture of excitement and apprehension in her expression. "What is it, I believe? That is, I'm fairly certain." She took a deep breath. "We're going to have a baby." The book slipped from Ethan's hands, forgotten. "A baby, you're sure?" Felicity nodded. "Martha confirmed my suspicions today. The child should arrive by late summer, perhaps August." For a moment, Ethan sat perfectly still, processing the information. Then, with a whoop of joy that startled Felicity into dropping her mending, he leapt from his chair and swept her into his arms, spinning her around the small parlor. "Ethan," she laughed, clinging to his shoulders. "Be careful." He set her down immediately, his expression changing to one of concern. "I'm sorry. Should you be resting? Do you need anything? Are you feeling well?" Felicity couldn't help but laugh at his sudden transformation from exuberant to anxious. "I'm perfectly fine. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time, you know." "But not my wife," he replied, his hands still gentle on her waist. "Not carrying my child." The wonder in his voice brought tears to Felicity's eyes. She had worried briefly about his reaction. They had discussed children, of course, but had agreed to wait a year or two until they were more settled. This early blessing had been unexpected. "Are you pleased, then?" she asked softly. Ethan's answer was a kiss so tender it brought fresh tears to her eyes. "More than I can express," he murmured against her lips. "A family of our own, Felicity. A true home." The news of the upcoming addition to the Mercer family spread quickly through Hot Springs, met with the same warmth and support that had characterized the town's response to their marriage. Martha immediately began planning and knitting tiny garments, while Mrs. Peterson adjusted Felicity's work schedule to accommodate her changing condition. As winter grudgingly gave way to spring, the stage company resumed its full schedule, meaning Ethan was away more frequently. He approached each departure with increasing reluctance, concerned about leaving Felicity alone as her pregnancy progressed. "I'm hardly alone," she assured him before one such trip in early May. "Martha checks on me daily and Mrs. Cooper from next door has promised to come at once if I need anything. I could speak to the company about taking local routes only until after the baby comes," Ethan suggested, not for the first time, "and reduce our income just when we need it most." Felicity shook her head. "We've discussed this, Ethan. I'm fine, the baby is fine, and you'll be back in 4 days." He sighed, placing a gentle hand on the swell of her abdomen. "You'll send for me if anything changes. Promise me." "I promise," she said, covering his hand with her own. "Now go, before you miss the departure." Each homecoming was sweeter than the last, with Ethan marveling at the changes in Felicity's body and bringing back small gifts for her or the baby from the towns along his route: a soft blanket from Denver, a carved wooden rattle from Cheyenne. The summer of 1879 proved as hot as the previous winter had been cold. By July, Felicity's movements had slowed considerably, her body heavy with the child that would soon join their family. She had ceased working at the mercantile entirely, focusing on preparing their home for the baby's arrival and resting during the worst heat of the day. Ethan had managed to arrange his schedule so that he would be in Hot Springs for the entire month of August, when the baby was expected to arrive. His protective instincts had only grown stronger as Felicity's time approached, and she found his constant attention both touching and occasionally stifling. "You don't need to watch me quite so closely," she told him one evening as they sat on their porch, seeking relief from the heat inside the house. "I'm not going to shatter." "I know," he replied, though his eyes didn't leave her face. "I just want to be sure you have everything you need." Felicity smiled, reaching for his hand. "What I need is for my husband to relax. The baby will come when it's ready, not before." As if determined to prove her wrong, the first pains began that very night, waking Felicity from a fitful sleep. She lay quietly for some time, counting the minutes between contractions as Martha had instructed her, not wanting to wake Ethan until she was certain. When the pains grew stronger and more regular, she finally touched his shoulder. "Ethan, it's time." He was instantly awake, sitting up so quickly he nearly fell from the bed. "Now, are you sure? Should I get Martha, the doctor?" "Yes to all," Felicity said, managing a smile despite the discomfort. "But there's no need to panic. First babies often take their time." This particular baby, however, seemed determined to make a prompt entrance into the world. By the time Dr. Wilson arrived, summoned by a breathless Ethan, Felicity's labor was well advanced. Martha took charge of the situation with practiced efficiency, directing Ethan to heat water and gather clean linens before shooing him from the bedroom. "But I want to stay with her," he protested. "Not the way things are done," Martha replied firmly. "Go pace in the parlor like every other expectant father since the beginning of time." The hours that followed were a blur for Ethan, marked by Felicity's occasional cries from behind the closed door and Martha's brief, uninformative updates. He alternated between pacing the small parlor and sitting with his head in his hands, praying for the safety of his wife and child. Just as dawn was breaking, a different cry pierced the quiet house, the lusty wail of a newborn. Ethan froze mid-pace, his heart racing as he stared at the bedroom door, willing it to open. When it finally did, Martha appeared, tired but smiling. "Congratulations, brother, you have a son." Ethan felt his knees weaken. "A son, and Felicity is asking for you," Martha replied, stepping aside to let him enter. Felicity lay propped against the pillows, her face pale and damp with perspiration but radiant with a joy Ethan had never seen before. In her arms was a small bundle wrapped in one of the blankets Martha had prepared. "Come meet your son," Felicity said softly as Ethan approached the bed on unsteady legs. He sat carefully beside her, peering at the tiny face visible among the blankets. The baby had a shock of dark hair like his father's, and when he briefly opened his eyes, Ethan saw they were the deep blue of all newborns. "He's perfect," Ethan whispered, reaching out to gently touch his son's cheek. "You're both perfect. Would you like to hold him?" Felicity asked. With more fear than he'd ever felt facing armed stage robbers, Ethan carefully took the small bundle into his arms. The weight of his son, so light yet so significant, brought tears to his eyes. "Hello, little one," he murmured. "I'm your father." The baby yawned in response, his tiny fists waving slightly before settling back into sleep. "He needs a name," Felicity said, watching them with tired contentment. They had discussed possibilities during the long winter evenings but had never settled on a final choice. Now, looking at his son's face, Ethan knew. "William," he said, "after my father, William Thomas Mercer." "It's perfect," Felicity agreed. "Welcome to the world, William Thomas." The arrival of William Thomas Mercer, called Will by his adoring parents, brought a new dimension to Ethan and Felicity's life together. The exhaustion of sleepless nights was balanced by the joy of watching their son grow and develop, each small milestone celebrated as the miracle it was. Ethan found it increasingly difficult to leave for his stage runs, the partings from his wife now complicated by separations from his son. He began to consider alternatives, discussing possibilities with Felicity during the quiet evenings when Will was finally asleep. "Frank Peterson mentioned he's looking for a partner in the mercantile," Felicity said one such night in late October as they sat before the fire in their parlor. "His arthritis is getting worse, and he needs someone to handle the physical aspects of the business." Ethan considered this thoughtfully. It would mean being home every night, and no risk of stage robberies, Felicity added, unable to keep the hope from her voice. "Less pay too, at least initially," Ethan pointed out. "Could we manage?" Felicity nodded. "I've been keeping our accounts carefully. With my experience at the mercantile, I could help with the books while still caring for Will. And as a partner, your income would grow with the business." The idea took root, and by Christmas of 1879, Ethan had given notice to the stage company and finalized the partnership agreement with Frank Peterson. The transition was easier than expected, with Ethan discovering that his talent for dealing with people and managing logistics served him as well in commerce as it had in transportation. As 1880 dawned, bringing with it the new decade and the promise of continued growth for the Dakota Territory, the Mercers found themselves firmly established as respected members of the Hot Springs community. Their home, once so bare, was now filled with the accumulated treasures of family life whilst toys scattered across the parlor floor. Books lining shelves Ethan had built, the scent of Felicity's baking permeating every room. On the anniversary of the night Ethan had first come to Felicity's rescue at the Silver Dollar Saloon, they sat together on their porch, while sleeping peacefully in his mother's arms while the setting sun painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson. "Do you ever think about how different our lives might have been if you hadn't passed by the saloon that night?" Felicity asked, her voice soft so as not to wake their son. Ethan's arm tightened around her shoulders. "I try not to. The idea of you trapped there or of never knowing you at all." He shook his head. "I prefer to think it was meant to be, that somehow we would have found each other regardless." "A romantic notion for such a practical man," Felicity teased gently. "You've made me a romantic," he replied, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Among other things." "Oh." "What other things?" "A husband, a father," he smiled down at Will. "A better man than I was before." Felicity leaned into his embrace, her heart full. "And you've made me a wife, a mother, and a woman who finally understands what it means to be truly home." As the last light faded from the sky and the first stars appeared, they remained on the porch, a family created from the most unlikely of beginnings, bound by love that had grown from rescue to romance to the deep, abiding connection of shared lives and dreams. In the years that followed, Hot Springs continued to grow and prosper, as did the Mercer family. Ethan eventually bought out Frank Peterson entirely when the older man decided to retire to California, expanding the mercantile to include hardware and building supplies as the town developed. Felicity divided her time between helping with the business accounts and raising their growing family, which came to include a daughter, Elizabeth Martha, born in 1882, and another son, James Henry, who arrived in 1885. Martha never remarried but found fulfillment in her role as the town's most respected boarding house proprietor and doting aunt to the Mercer children. She remained Felicity's closest friend and confidante, the sisterhood between them as strong as any blood relation. News occasionally reached them of Harold Winters, who had indeed gone to Deadwood but had eventually moved on to Rapid City, where he had apparently found sobriety and a measure of redemption managing a reputable hotel. The Dakota Territory became the states of North and South Dakota in 1889, a development celebrated throughout Hot Springs with parades and speeches. Ethan, now among the town's leading businessmen, was asked to speak at the official ceremony, an honor that would have seemed unimaginable to the young man who had once been satisfied with the dangerous but simple life of a stage guard. On quiet evenings when the children were asleep and the day's work was done, Ethan and Felicity often sat together on the porch of their home, larger now, with additions built as their family grew, but still the same house where they had begun their married life. They would speak of the day's events, plan for the future, or simply sit in comfortable silence, secure in the knowledge that they had created something precious and lasting from the chaos and uncertainty of their first meeting. And sometimes, on special occasions like their wedding anniversary or the night they had first met, they would dance slowly in their parlor, no music needed beyond the rhythm of their hearts beating in unison, grateful for the twist of fate that had brought them together on that fateful night when a saloon owner locked a young woman in at night, and a cowboy said, "You're coming home with me."